Naturally, the question that is uppermost in the minds of all today on the eve of 8888 is, what's the real significance of this date? Those who believe in numerology know that the placement of figures, numbers, indicates a certain position favorable for the accomplishment of one's wishes, aims under certain circumstances. Those who have no particular faith with this science are not affected. So when mother was asked once, what do these things mean? She said, it depends upon you. If you believe, you believe. If you don't, it matters little. Anyway, in our ashram, this kind of observance, I think, started with 1, 2, 3, 4, February 1, 1934. And then I believe it was in 45, 56, 67. 4th of May 67 was considered to be a very climactic occasion. And I remember I even brought out a small book entitled God, including striking lines from Sri Aurobindo's poetry on God. And mother was very happy to distribute that book to many people on that day. And it happened that in one of his earlier letters, Sri Aurobindo had indicated 1967 would be the year when the supramental power would enter into the phase of its realization of supramental manifestation would enter into the phase of realizing power, whatever it may mean. The previous day, mother was asked, does it mean a special descent of the supramental? She said, if the one drop of divine love were to manifest, were to come down, all would lie flat. There is no purity to support this descent of love. That's what she said. Now regarding 88, 78 is past, 88. Being an old-timer and being accustomed to Sri Aurobindo's definition of this symbology of 4 as complete manifestation, perfect creation, somehow in my mind I had associated perfection with the figure 4 and 8 double perfection. But on looking closely into the subject, I have found that long ago mother indicated that 8, the figure 8, even singly, indicates the coming together of two hemispheres. The upper hemisphere, Satchidananda, with the supramental attached to it, and the lower hemisphere of matter, life and mind. These two circles coming together indicate a special point of intersection, interchange, and an opportunity for a larger dose of manifestation. She has also defined it as a double enclosure, assuring protection from outer enemies and inner enemies. Now, the outer enemies does not mean human enemies, means forces from the universe, the hostile elements in the universe opposed to human progress towards the divine. And the inner enemies, which are more abundant, more common, are those which reside in us always. Who are these inner enemies? After years of study, experience, I have found that the formula given by our ancients of our 6 enemies is the most comprehensive and the most factual. They are defined as Krodha, Mada, Matsarya, Moha, Lobha, Kama. Kama, Mada, Moha, Matsarya, Lobha, and what else? Krodha. Now, all these, it is interesting to know, have their origin in our vital being. And that's the subject we have just started studying last time. We covered the nature of the vital being, the vital energies. We noted also that the vital is not necessarily bad. It can be good, it can be helpful, and it is indispensable for any kind of manifestation, material, intellectual, or spiritual. But before the positive side of the vital begins to play its part, we have much to do with the negative side of the vital. We know the theoretical favorable features of the vital through books, but the negative features we know by intimate experience, and they form one by one the stumbling blocks, difficulties in yoga. And that is where we catch up with our theme. Let us start. Sri Aurobindo says, that the major difficulties thrown up by the vital are lust, wrath, and ego. For sake of our study, we will take up first krodha, anger. Now anger, let us be clear, whether we are spiritual seekers or not, anger is always unjustified. But it is always accompanied by a sense of justification, self-justification. And every moment of anger is rooted in ego. We may talk of principles, we may talk of provocations, but the root, the base is ego. And for a spiritual seeker, anger is poison. We have read legends, stories in our scriptural literature of how rishis, ascetics lost years and years of their spiritual merit of tapas by a single moment of anger. While they are not to be taken literally, there is a fact, there is a truth in each of those legends. Anger, luckily, is not our own manufacture. It is a force from universal nature. It is always abroad, and whoever is open to it, gets open to it by any combination of circumstances, it enters into that person. And if I am sensitive, if I am watchful, I can know the approach of the moment of anger even before it finds expression in me. That means I should be conscious. I should be self-aware. Then I know it is coming. And Sri Aurobindo describes 3 steps to get rid of this anger. First, he says, there should be a will to change. It is not easy to have that will, because if you study the lives of people who get angry for little reason or no reason, you will find they never feel they are wrong. The blame is always on circumstances, on other people who evoke that anger in them. They will not admit, at any rate at that moment, that they are angry. They will show more anger in just telling you that they are not angry. And particularly, when this anger is coated with a sense of righteousness, that so and so has done this, and you show your displeasure, you show your unforgiving response and blame that person. That is called the righteous anger. The anger goes with a certain force of justification, exposure of the other person. And you will be interested to know that Mother once said that of all the vibrations from people, the most difficult for her was one of righteous indignation. When some of us would go and speak of somebody else, X, Y, Z, with passion, with intensity, that so and so has done this wrong, a thing which he should not have done. Impliedly, I am a superior being and I am exposing somebody else. Now she felt this is a most unspiritual attitude. She never of course showed us her displeasure when there was display of righteous indignation. She was always very solemn, wouldn't say a word. But it has happened. I have seen number of times these things happening, and it is only when I read that this was the most difficult vibration which you could not bear, I felt, along with others, how guilty we were all in inflicting such a vibration on her. Some of us at any rate felt that we were serving the cause, we were serving the right and the truth by bringing out the wrong and the error on the part of somebody else who was wrong. But it never occurred to us to examine the motive. Apparently, yes, very well intentioned. But at the root, there was that righteousness. Righteousness, self-righteousness, is something to which Mother always reacted very strongly. Self-righteousness is something of which Sri Aurobindo always made jokes, spoke in great irony. And if you have read his thoughts and aphorisms, you will find a number of places where he pulls number of punches on the self-righteous persons. That is, by the way, the first condition Sri Aurobindo prescribes is will to change. We should not feel that we are justified, our anger is justified. We should sincerely feel that it is wrong. Even if there is an apparent justification, there should not be a reaction of anger. And that will to change must be there. Not because it is mentioned in scriptures, but because it is alien to our psychic nature, alien to the soul. So the will to change. One may be weak, one may be helpless by force of habit. It is understandable. But if within us there is not that readiness to recognize our fault, a willingness to change, then it is idle to speak of getting rid of anger. Let us assume that we have the will to change. Next, what do? There is anger, there is a movement of anger, there is a seething anger. We should refuse expression to that anger. Suppress that. Don't express. Western psychologists will tell you that you are doing great harm to yourself and you are creating a volcano in your nature. But yogic psychology does not agree. If we refuse expression, the force gets blunted. It does not gather more strength. twice, thrice. If you refuse, it loses that habit. But each time, you must not express that anger. You may have anger, but don't express it. Whether it is a servant, whether it is somebody in the house, or a subordinate in the office, even though they give ostensibly an occasion for anger, don't express it. For those who seek spiritual life, they have to suppress expression of anger. That is the first step. It is only as suppression becomes a habit that nature starts rejecting it. Rejection, human nature being what it is, comes after the climate has been diffused by refusal of expression. And third, there is the psychic influence. Side by side, we have to evoke the psychic touch, the psychic opening, and that goes on telling on those parts of us which are prone to anger. These are the three steps: will to change, refuse expression, and psychic influence. For those who, for any reason, are closed to their psychic depths because of their dry nature or ascetic disciplines, there is the spiritual ingression, there is the spiritual force, spiritual influence from above the mind. That settles some kind of peace, which negates the eruption of anger. Having said this much, purely from a spiritual point of view, in sadhana, it is observed that anger, movement of anger, raising the tone to express your anger, cuts off the link with your psychic at that moment. I have observed it in myself and in others. At that moment, there is a veil. The link is cut off. You raise your voice and something intervenes. Now all this comes from the ego. I am denied. My wish is not fulfilled. What I expect is not done. My way is not followed. My wisdom is not accepted. Mine, I. So ego. Ultimately, anger is a movement of ego. For lesser mortals like us, anger is an absolute taboo. I say this because there have been cases of great rishis, realized beings, showing anger. I advisedly use the word showing. Sri Aurobindo himself recalls how there were other occasions, but at least he mentions one occasion when somebody, one of the inmates of the ashram, was shouting at mother at the staircase door, started arguing, talking and shouting. Sri Aurobindo was sitting in his room working. He heard it. Obviously the vibrations must have reached him. And he said, he got up and started coming. He had a great wave of what he calls Rudra Bhava, a divine anger. And he said, who is that? And that person sneaked out. Sri Aurobindo records that even this Rudra Bhava took him by surprise. There are such occasions. The God Rudra himself is an embodiment of this bhava or movement of anger, but it is anger for the destruction of evil, for the destruction of falsehood, for the destruction of the titan. It is an anger, a kind of passion in service of the divine. This does not, of course, give us an excuse to claim that all our anger is Rudra Bhava. We will be only cheating ourselves. It is a long way before we can arrive at that state when this kind of bhava can come to us. Once the psychic is there, open, we see the pettiness of anger. It is aggression. Aggression against a weaker person. Aggression against a person who may have done fault and he may be in a position he can't defend himself. But does anger solve a problem, even from practical point of view? Anger provokes counter anger. Maybe the other person is not situated in a position where he can express his counter anger. He may be a subordinate, he may be a dependent, he may be a student, he holds himself. But that natural reaction of anger throws out its vibrations. And the person who gets angry, the sadhak, the seeker, gets emptied, feels emptied of his strength once he calms down. One begins to wonder whether it has been worth it. Has it been worth getting angry, dissipating my energy? And how long does it take to recover, to get back into the state of calm and receptivity? So this is the first obstruction of anger, of what is vital in the form of anger. Very common, even among those who don't pretend to lead spiritual life. It is there. And in the legend of Jamadagni, it has been shown to what ridiculous lengths anger can drive even a rishi like Jamadagni. He ordered his son Parashurama to behead his mother for some little fault of hers. These things have not happened on the physical plane, but they are all symbolic, and they are intended to drive home the lesson that we lose control over ourselves when we allow the movement of anger. So remember, the first step we have to take in sadhana, as far as the vital difficulties are concerned, is to know that under no circumstances is anger permissible. We may look foolish, we may be called impractical, whatever it is, but anger has no place in our scheme of life. This is the first major obstruction of the vital, and there are more. We will take them up in our next session.